on this episode of On the Mic with Mike and Moose.
I would also say this, there is a lot of church hurt that a pastor cannot help. And I hate to say that because a lot of times a pastor tries to go in to help those that have been hurt by the church. And it's almost like pulling two dogs off of each other. Can I be honest with that? And you go in, you try to break the dogs up, and what happens? You get attacked, and you're trying to be there for both sides, and it can be very difficult. You're having to take a step back and say, okay, who's right, who's wrong? And I've learned this. I've learned this, my brother, that God is the one that's right.
What's up, everybody? This is your boy Moose coming to you from just outside of Birmingham, Alabama.
Hey, y'all, it's Mike. I'm here in Moore, Oklahoma, the tornado capital of the world. We're glad to see you here.
I'm glad you got that one right this time.
You see how I started there at the end, though? I was like,
Yeah. Zip, 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 zip.
yeah. So
Um, so this one is a kind of a topical. We've had some issues recently. I'm not gonna go into
yeah,
issues, but I do think this is a very good topic to discuss because a lot of times when I speak to somebody who has left church or dabbled into church but never really got into the whole experience,
mhm.
the topic always comes up is, well, the church hurt me. And whether it's somebody who's been as a part of church or somebody who was never really a part of church but was kind of figuring it out, it just seems like this needs to be addressed because we've all been in situations where something happens at church, whether from a parishioner or a member uh, focus or from a pastor's focus. I'm sure there's been times in your pastoral experience where the church you've been a member of, and we talked a little bit about it, but where church you've been a member of kind of just hurts you spiritually.
Yep.
Now, when I left the church, I never really like formally left, but when I quit going and I was essentially sharing my views of being agnostic, it was not because I was hurt per se, but I took the narrative of the church was hurting other people.
Yes. Oh,
And my faith was not strong. And it took me building that faith back up before I got into position to where I am now. And it's real easy with political jargon, political rhetoric to kind of pose one thing against the other and make it seem like it's something that's not. And sometimes a break is not necessarily a bad thing. That's my opinion.
yeah.
And that's just because we're all different. We're all wired different.
Yeah.
And sometimes we can be overwhelmed. With that said, I wish my break hadn't taken the path that it did take, which was essentially 10 years away from the church. So, um, but once I kind of made that commitment to say, I'm older, I'm in my 30s, maybe what I saw was not what I thought I saw. My faith grew strong and grew stronger, and it's as strong as it's ever been. And it's like the faith, Jesus talks about the faith of a child. And I feel like my faith is, we talked about this in one of the first episodes we ever did of this podcast. The first time I read the Bible, I feel like sometimes that my faith is as strong now as it was then. But with that said, that doesn't mean there's not still some hurt. I'm not gonna lie to you. I had an incident recently that made me question being a member of my church.
Yeah.
And my wife knew I was upset. Her family knew I was upset because, of course, she goes back and tells them how upset I am. And instead of making a knee jerk reaction, because I could have very well made a nasty knee jerk reaction, I do what I always do. And for me, that's pray and look for discernment and then kind of just lay things out. And so after a day or two, I was okay.
Oh, yeah.
But I feel like sometimes we want things to be our way. And this goes for, you know, any situation. And if we don't get our way immediately, sometimes the results of our actions create problems long term. So
Yeah.
I don't know what your thoughts are on that. Um, I just know that a younger me would have reacted a lot differently than what I did recently. And for me, it's life experience. It's kind of life and faith experience that have kind of led me to not being so quick to make assumptions.
Yeah. And with me, my viewpoint's going to come from that of clergy and of a pastor. And so anything that I'm about to say comes from a place of love, comes from a place of bathing any of these things in prayer, because as a pastor, I have to deal with people that have been hurt by the church many times. What happens a lot of the times, now there is true, genuine church hurt, like Moose is talking about, true, genuine church hurt. There's also assumption that will try to creep in when we don't have the clues or the answers for everything that's happening, right? Church hurt is real. It can be very hurtful, but there are some times where there's assumptions. And the old saying, when we assume, it makes a out of you and me both. And we have to do like Moose says, we have to take a step back. We have to pray. We have to look at this. Was it personal? Was it against me? What's going on here? And age does help you. Age does help you. And I would say this, spiritual age helps you as well. You might be 40, 50, and you might be a baby in Christ, and you're going to get hurt a lot easier because you're just not ready for those things that might come your way. I would also say this, there is a lot of church hurt that a pastor cannot help. And I hate to say that, because a lot of times a pastor tries to go in to help those that have been hurt by the church, and it's almost like pulling two dogs off of each other. Can I be honest with that? And you go in, you try to break the dogs up, and what happens? You get attacked, and you're trying to be there for both sides, and it can be very difficult. You're having to take a step back and say, okay, who's right, who's wrong? And I've learned this, my brother, that God is the one that's right. And just like when you have an accident, you always have witnesses. You might have two or three witnesses. They're going to see the accident three different ways. They're going to see it. You're going to have the person that was rear-ended. You're going to have the person that was the one that received that, and you're going to have the one that saw what happened. You're going to have three different stories. Will the truth be in it? Yes. But with church hurt, we have to understand there is truth in it and there really is hurt. I would say the place where true blue church hurt happens with is when you have a narcissistic pastor or leader in place, when you have people in leadership that are that way as well, and when judgment goes basically without check. If you have a judgmental church, especially in a smaller church, when you have a smaller church and it goes unchecked, you will have a lot of church hurt as well. We had a church in South Carolina, Moose, that we were a part of, and I was the pastor there, and we were doing VBS one night. And there was a young lady that came in short shorts. That was it. She was a young lady. And instead of going up to the young lady and asking her, was this her first time? What can we do to help you? They got into a group and they circled one another, right? And they were talking bad about the girl and the girls that were there. That was church hurt because those girls heard what those older ladies were saying.
Mm-hmm.
It's maybe those were the only shorts that those girls had. Maybe they came from a bad situation. Maybe they didn't know how to be at church. But the problem is what I go back to it again, is assuming something. When we assume on either side, it creates a divide, and the enemy will come in when we assume. When we assume, the enemy would like to come in and let us fight against one another. If the enemy will turn us against one another, he doesn't have to work as hard. And I believe that's what happens in a lot of church hurt. If people could truly say what was happening without always having to tell their story, their side of it, while listening to the other person, the problem is this, Moose, is that we as humans always feel like we're right. And we have to take a step back and say, this is what I have to do. I have to take a step back as a pastor all the time. When people accuse me of something and I have to stand back and say, did I do that? Is that something I did? Because when I was younger, Moose, someone would complain about how I preached or how I did things. And I would say, how dare you? I worked hard on this and I worked hard on this decision. But now what I do, being 47, I take a step back and say, maybe I need to reevaluate. And that's what we have to do with any time that we have to confront somebody or have to address something. While doing this, I just got a text message from someone that was just church hurt, believe it or not. And I thought they were gone. I thought they were never coming back to church. I thought there was no way that they were going to come back. And I've already resolved in my brain because I've tried, I've reached out, I've called, I've texted, all the things, right? They just sent me a thing that just said, Pastor, the reason, yes, we were hurt, but the reason why we haven't been, and I'm not going to air out their news, is because of some situations in life, and we'll be back Sunday. See, assuming. I assumed that they would never be back. I assumed that they were hurt beyond repair. What happened, Moose, was someone made a Facebook post, not me, somebody else in the church made a Facebook post. And what happened? What do you think? They placed themselves within the narrative of the Facebook post. That happens too often. Moose, you probably see it happening in your church or different places or even at work. Someone creates a Facebook post and someone puts themselves into the narrative of it, and they make themselves the enemy of it. Sometimes we make ourselves the enemy, and the person who created the post wasn't even thinking about us. Now, let's be honest. There are some times that people do, okay? There is subtweeting, sub-posting, but for the most part, especially if it's your pastor, they're not thinking of you. They're thinking of the whole body when they type out their message. And, but from my perspective, we've got to watch the assuming. We've got to pray. We've got to stay prayed up. We got to love one another. And one last thing I will say, Moose, there are some, and this is another sliver, that it wasn't church hurt to begin with. And I'm going to say this, and people need to hear this. It was that they were not willing to submit to the Bible, right? Or to the leadership of the church. I'm not talking about the pastor. I'm talking about the council, the deacons, where they were confronted about a situation and they said, we're going to take our ball and go home. Y'all, we can't call that church hurt. That's not church hurt. That is not submitting, okay? Because I worry that we've thrown the label church hurt on so many things, and it's not always been church hurt. There's sometimes we were not willing to submit to do what the Bible says. And so, but that was a long tangent. I'm sorry about that, bro.
No, that's fine. That's fine. I think that sometimes things have got to be aired out. And I think it's important for everyone to know, and you mentioned it just a minute ago, that you are humble enough to say that you're not 100% right all the time. And
Never.
sometimes you have to have a reality check yourself. You know, um, I have a pretty big ego, and I know it. I've known it since I was 15 years old, and I don't like when my ego is put in check. But sometimes I may be a little forceful, defensive, but just like I do with everything else, I usually think about things, and usually I can see the other side of the story.
Yeah.
And I can say, okay, yeah, so my ego was a little out of check at that point. But church hurt. Um, you know, I'm doing a series of videos right now talking about being overwhelmed, talking about coming back from abuse, talking about stuff like that. And I think in today's culture, um, the biggest church hurt that you see is mainly from abuse, and the abuse was there.
Hmm.
And I can completely understand how someone can be so traumatized from the abuse that they received, whether it was physical, verbal, sexual, whatever, and that pushing them away because, when you're a child or teenager or whatever, you're vulnerable. And then as you get older and you're put in situations where you're in charge or you're above somebody, you start thinking about how could somebody do this?
Yep.
And instead of blaming the person, they blame the institution the person was a part of.
Exactly.
And, there's a lady that's on my book of faces that I met a couple years ago. Um, she bought tickets from me for a football game, and I'm not going to lie to you. I've been very close to clicking that button to not have her on my friends list anymore because it's almost like I get it, and I want to sympathize with you because I've seen stuff like that with my mother. My mother had was abused as a child, sexually abused as a child, and so up until my mother got to the point to where she couldn't speak anymore, because of her stroke, it was always present. So I get it, but it's never like with this lady, the one I'm talking about. It's never the person. It's never the man who did this to her. It's the
Yep.
white Christian man from her church that did this to her.
Yep.
And evil's everywhere. And so sometimes you also got to look at church hurt and realize that just because somebody went to your church or somebody was affiliated with a specific church doesn't mean that's the doctrine that that church
No.
is teaching. And I think that there's never like people have a hard time disconnecting the evil individual, from what they're doing. I mean, this guy that abused her could have been a little league baseball coach.
Yeah.
He's not out there blaming little league baseball.
No.
This guy could have been a member of the Lions Club or the Rotary Club. She's not out there blaming the Rotary or the Lions Club. No, she's
Exactly.
blaming the easiest thing that everybody else tries to blame, and that's the church.
Yep.
And
That's it.
so
Good.
I'm not taking this away from her. I think that she has every right to be hurt. She has
Yeah.
the right to be upset. She has every right to sit there and say, this man was protected.
Yeah.
Sure, that's part of what it is. And of course, she has some issues with like the current political administration and kind of his past. And then, you got the priests, all the priests that got in trouble in the last 20 years, Boy Scout leaders, you know, different church denominations, the sexual abuse is going on in different churches. But I mean, you know, those who are predators, those who are doing, they're doing it more than just coming to the churches.
Yeah.
They're the Boy Scout leaders. They were the YMCA leaders. Um they were the t-ball coaches or youth sport coaches or what. I mean, there's more than just the church. And so I think a lot of times people find the easiest way to blame it. And right now, the easiest way to put blame on some sort of group, organization, or a place that people can do it is the church. And so, I know I've gone off on a little tangent, but it's just one of those things where you just kind of have to, when you look at it from a 10,000-foot view, you have to
Yeah.
sometimes wonder, is this church hurt? Is this my background hurt? Is this,
Trauma. Yeah.
is it trauma there's just so much that goes on with it. And so I feel for those people who
Yeah.
genuinely have church hurt, and then those people who have hurt and trauma from somebody who may have been, or some situation that may be affiliated with a church. It may not necessarily be church hurt, but it comes to that. So,
And I say this, and so we'll say this with love, y'all. There are some people that will yell church hurt when they're looking for an exit door. Okay. That will happen once in a blue moon, too. When people feel like they're no longer valuable enough, which is a lie of the enemy, a big lie of the enemy, or they found reason to leave and they don't want to take anybody being mad at them. So they will proclaim church hurt or they will find that one excuse. I've had that happen multiple times as a pastor where this family was loving, 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 loving. Then one day they found one thing that irked them, like one small thing, nothing big. And then, hold on one second. Sorry about that, y'all. I had that turned off. Still got a phone call either way. Did it go sideways?
it did.
It did. Okay.
We
There
got
we go.
we saw a nice view of your thumb.
Yes. But what was I saying? Okay.
You were talking
There,
about the one family that had all
yeah.
these things
Yeah,
happening
they
at
were
one
doing
time.
good. They were doing good. And then they found one thing, a very small thing, and that's what they exited off. That's the reason why they left the church. It was never a big, dramatic conclusion. It was just something small, and they were able to take their exit. And they proclaimed church hurt all over Facebook. And you're like, but were you hurt? And so I'm gonna say this, and I'm gonna say it in the nicest of ways too. Please hear this. Pastors, ministers' wives, they can be church hurt as well. But here's the difference. There's a very select few amount of people that will know when we're hurt. Moose knows. I talk to Moose about things. But for the most part, I can't go around when someone's hurt me and say, guess what? Someone hurt me again.
Mhm.
We've had to learn because in our what we go through, it's something that we've had to learn to get through it. That's not to diminish real church hurt. Yes, there's been abuse, and I could go on and on. There's people in my family that have been hurt by people in the church, not just talked about, physically hurt, and I'll keep it at that. And if the Pickets ever had an excuse to leave the church, we have quite a few. But to God be the glory. We know it's about Him when it's all said and done with. We know that God didn't do it to us. We know that God was not the one that was hurting us. We know that it was flesh and blood that was, and we have to surrender to that. So,
All right. Well, thanks everybody for coming and listening to this. This is the end of season 2. Mike and I are going to take about a week, about a month and a half off before we start season 3. Where the plan is for us to be back Good Friday. So we'll be talking about what a Good Friday it is, and hopefully start another 15 episodes and get season 3 in the next 4 months after that. And we appreciate everybody who's listened to us. We've got some merchandise that we'll link for our Rooted family. We have all of our socials, our handles, both for this website and personally, in the description. One thing I would like for you to do is share about it, share us, um, like us, hit that bell if you're watching on YouTube, or share it on. Right now we're on Apple and Podbean. Maybe with season 3 we'll get on Spotify.
Good.
It will also, if you're interested in joining our Rooted Discord, you can
Yes.
send us a message, Mike and Moose 2025 at gmail.com. We'll get you hooked up on that.
Yes.
Good way for us to kind of, be with each other and break bread on the internet, I guess. And
Yeah.
with that said, just want to let everybody know that I'm praying for you, and God bless you all. And Mike, you want to kind of do your little spiel?
Yeah, just two things. Number one, share this, even if it's horrific. And you can even put that, you can say, this is the most horrible podcast I've ever heard. That still gets us out there. So please still share it. Talk bad about it. Just get us out there, whatever you need to do. Even if you don't like us. No, I'm just kidding. I had to say that. But listen, if you have been hurt, the Father still says, come home. He loves you. God's mind for the bride of Christ has not changed. The church is still God's way, right? So no matter where you've been, no matter who you've become or who you've been around, come home. The Father is waiting for you. And I'm praying for you too.
God bless you.